event, enhancing digital content creation with CrafterCMS's visual authoring experience. My name is Russ Danner. I'm VP of Products here at CrafterCMS, and I'll be your host and presenter for today. Now, let's take a quick look at our agenda. So I want to start off by quickly looking at the industry, competition, and how things evolved to where they are today. After that, I'd like to give you a demonstration of the multi-channel, framework-agnostic visual editing capabilities in CrafterCMS and other related functionality. Then I'd like to take a brief moment to talk about where we're headed at CrafterCMS, and then finally, we'll wrap things up with some Q&A. So please, if you have any questions at any point during the presentation, ask them in the Q&A area, and we'll take as many as we can during this period of the presentation. So with that, let's jump into visual editing. Now, despite the hype in the market from headless CMS vendors who've just recently begun including visual editing, we've all known that visual editing is the best way for authors and publishers to work efficiently for a very long time. In fact, to set some context, the graphical user interface was introduced to the mass market by Apple in 1983 with the Lisa computer, as we can see here in this short clip.
That we could build a personal computer, taking advantage of the new technology in terms of the bitmap display, replace the command interpreter entirely with a graphics language. In other words, emulating the way people work in an office rather than asking them to change the way they do things, and use that same user interface to provide the integration in terms of moving data from one application to another.
Now, the real reason I shared this clip isn't just to say that we've known about GUIs for a long time. The main reason I showed it is that little bit at the end of that early insight on just how important it is for knowledge workers to work in interfaces that are natural and directly related to their tasks, work products, and other related artifacts. Abstraction and translation kills efficiency. By the year 2000, we'd gotten really good at graphical user interfaces in general, including sophisticated desktop tools for editing and publishing on traditional media. However, it was right around this time that the great usability reset was happening for computers. If you can believe it, this is a popular website, MySpace, in the early 2000s. The user experience is primitive and austere in really unbecoming ways. And content management systems, leveraging the same web technology as their interfaces, offered content authors that same austere web form style experience to update and edit their web pages. At the time, this reset on editing and publishing tools went without protest. The web was new, and every bit of technology behind it was new to most knowledge workers. Now, we call this era of the web, Web 1.0. It was a time of basic websites and e-commerce. The publishing model was one to many, and it was mainly read-only. Web pages were the only channel, and the technology and the browsers that delivered them were very simple. That said, over the course of the following 10 years, browsers improved, and with them, the CMS platforms improved greatly. By 2010, visual editing was back in place, and by 2019, it was very mature. Visual editing for web pages on traditional websites included page-based editing with pure WYSIWYG experiences that included point-and-click style editing and drag-and-drop based composition that was on par with traditional publishing and desktop applications. However, by the 2010s, it was clear that the fundamental nature of the web had changed at an architectural level. Social networks and platforms had become the dominant communication paradigm, and there was a growing relevance and extensibility of smart devices, and later a growth in the area of IoT that fueled the birth and then the formative years of Web 2.0. We find ourselves now in the late stages of the Web 2.0 era, a web that has reached maturity as a read-write, multi-channel, service-oriented, and distributed platform. And it is in this context that headless CMS was born. Around 2015, you start to see the first headless CMS platforms emerge, and by 2020, a mock architecture movement rightly pushed API-based first approaches. Since that time, there have been many new headless CMS platforms entering the market as companies and organizations struggle to meet the demands of a mature Web 2.0 environment with legacy monolithic page-centric platforms. Content as a service was not a new concept at this time. It was not new to us at CrafterCMS. We had been part of headless authoring and content delivery solutions for companies on the bleeding edge of integration and implementations for years. It was clear to us, even at an early stage, that this new category of CMS was really in many ways just a feature. Now that's a little bit of an oversimplification, but not entirely. However, content as a service may have been just a feature, but most legacy vendors did not have it. And this opened the door for new competition to enter the market, capitalizing on the need for API first and a growing demand for a shift towards SaaS solutions and subscription-based software. And it is at this moment that we see the next major authoring experience reset. Visual editing tools are not easy to build. And in this new headless, multi-channel world, visual tooling done correctly is even more complex to implement in a way that is simple and natural for the user. New players, eager to be one of the first movers, quickly went to market with simple form-based content capture. And it is this desire to get to market more than anything else that introduced the second reset on authoring usability. Even today, most headless CMS platforms offer only abstract, form-based authoring and have no instant preview for content authors. In this context, headless CMS has been amazing for developers because it frees them to use whatever platform they like and so on, but it has been a major loss in terms of efficiency and ease of use for content authors. The real driver behind the UI reset was not the architecture of the web. It was the opening the new architecture introduced and the need to go to market with MVP products. At CrafterCMS, we were fortunate to already have the concept of content as a service, a clear separation of presentation, content, and code, and visual editing tools. We did not need to reduce the usability of the tools for our customers. While most of our competition was starting over with form-based editing, we were able to focus on maturing that visual editing capabilities for Web 2.0, a maturity that most vendors are still working on to achieve to this day. So let's define that. Obviously, the first thing that we're going to need is a WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get, in-place editing with immediate feedback in preview. I'm not talking about a form that sits alongside the content where the content updates as I edit the form. I'm talking about a content author really being able to touch their work product. Ideally, for copy and for assets and for composition, you should be able to touch the content itself and make edits directly on that content. And because this is a Web 2.0 multi-channel world with new and powerful, mature application frameworks released all the time, this capability needs to be implemented in a way that it can easily plug into any of the tech stacks or frameworks. Of course it does. The whole point of going headless is to be able to break the constraints of front-end channels and technologies. So a mature editing and preview capability is one that can be applied universally, regardless of the channel or the tech stack. You also need to be able to support drag and drop layout and page and screen design. We'll look at this more closely in a bit, but there are many cases where content authors need to be able to edit and create bespoke artifacts. So they're not going to be working with heavily structured or predefined things. They're going to want to be able to create things on their own, and drag and drop offers one of the best and most natural ways for an author to accomplish that mission. Further, the tool also needs a way to support non-visual configuration and metadata. This is where abstract form-based content and metadata capture really fits the bill. It's not when I'm working with the visual aspects of my design, but when I'm working with the non-visual aspects. And there's a few other use cases where form-based content capture can make sense, but it's an exception to the rule, not the rule. We also want those tools to easily fit in with modern workflows. And at this point, authors should be able to leverage feedback and support from analytics platforms, AI, and other tools that elevate their creativity and make their jobs more efficient and easier. Okay, so now that we know what visual editing should be for a headless CMS, let's jump into CrafterCMS and take a look at visual editing for any channel and any platform and what that looks like. So the first thing we're going to do is log into Crafter Studio, and here you can see I have a variety of projects and they range in terms of type of use case, like this Alexa blueprint here. They also range in types of frameworks. We have Next, we have React, we have Angular, Vue, Bootstrap, and a number of other frameworks. Now, if I click on this Alexa blueprint here, you can see that this is a pure headless use case. There are no pages here. These are facts. I can use the Alexa emulator in the preview area, or I can use the fact browser to browse facts and edit them. So I'm not editing a web page here. I'm just editing fact objects that can be respond in that Alexa skill. All right, now let's jump back out to the projects window, and we're going to go to this project that I've set up for the webinar called Webinar. Okay, you can see here, now we're looking at a more traditional site. This is what we call in-context preview. As I scroll down through the site here, you can see it's a beautiful parallax style website. And you can see that in preview, it functions normally. It's going to work exactly like a live site, except it's in this safe authoring sandbox here where everything's functional, but I can make changes to it. Those changes are tracked and versioned for me automatically, and I can work. And here you can see we can open up the left-hand toolbar and see the information architecture. Now, if I want to make edits to content, I can go up to the right-hand corner here and turn on this pencil, and you can see this turns on editing tools. And you can see as I mouse over the site experience, different copy and so on highlights. And you can see I can also pick up images off my desktop, for example, and drag those and just drop them where they go. So we're dropping a video here. We upload that video, and we're immediately playing the video. So you can see here we're going to convert this fitness site to a AR/VR headset product site. Now let's change some copy. So I just click on the copy and I change it. And you can see I'm editing directly in my styles, directly on the canvas. And this is what we talked about where authors can truly touch what they're editing. They can see how it's going to kern. They can see exactly how it looks while they're editing it. It just feels natural. We'll do another example up here. We'll change the company name to Real Vision X. All right. All right. Now let's scroll down a little bit. And we've got another area here. Now you can see here again the title here. I'm editing just this copy, and it's the style sheet in the site that's controlling the styles in this area. Let's make a little correction here. Let's make this next generation. Sounds a little bit better. Now, if we click on this area, you can see it's a rich text editor. And so I want to change the copy here, but I need some help. So let's go to ChatGPT. We'll put in a query here. Wait for a response. Okay, let's copy that. And now we can click in, select it, and paste it. And you can see, again, that was very easy to create some copy and get some help. All right, let's change the image here. Now you can see instead of dragging off my desktop, I'm going to search a library of images, a little bit of digital asset management light there, and just drop that headset image in. Now let's change this figure here, and we'll use some of the rich text editor features. So we'll highlight here and make it bold, and we'll change the color to, let's say, red, for example. And when we click out, that's what it looks like. And there we go, our change is made. Now again, in the background, we're versioning everything. So if there's something that you do that you don't like, you can always revert that change. Now, let's turn off the editing functionality because I want to show you something. So now the editing functionality is turned off, and we're going to scroll down. And you can see here that these pictures here, they have a little hover element. And This can make editing difficult because they're sort of in the way. I can't drag pictures or edit copy, or I have to kind of struggle to get to both. But when I turn on the editing features, I can give my site and my screens and so on cues so that they can unfurl themselves in a way that makes them easy to edit. You can see how these expand here. So now we're going to edit this section here. We'll change it to revolutionize our industry, and let's just drag some graphics off our desktop here. And you can see it's very easy to upload a picture for engineering. And then let's do some entertainment here. And then we'll get a little bit of design. And now let's change these labels as well. All right. Again, I'm working directly with the canvas, working with the clay, so to speak. And this is really important. It really helps an author to be productive when there's no abstraction. A form creates abstraction. Even if I'm editing and I see an instant preview alongside of what I'm doing, the visual abstraction where I've got to work in one area and then wait for it to update in another creates a little bit of a dissonance. All right, now let's see how it looks when the editing tools are off. You can see, yep, those hovers look good. Okay, great. Now, maybe I don't like where the position of these tiles are. And you can see here now, this whole page is constructed out of components, including these tiles. So like, for example, I'm going to pick up this entertainment tile and just drop it into the middle. And there it is, it's moved. Now to illustrate this idea of drag and drop editing a little bit more, let's go to this landing page here. And you can see we've already got kind of a banner and a footer set up for us. And we're going to drag onto the screen a rich text editor. So let's go ahead and drop that. And you can see it puts a component out there on the screen for us with a default set of content. Let's go to ChatGPT and generate a lead-in for this, what is basically a webinar landing page. Okay. Now let's get the ChatGPT to update this. And, so we're going to iterate a little bit with ChatGPT and OpenAI. Okay. Yep. I like this a little bit better. So let's copy this. Okay. And then we just click on the content and then paste it. And there's our copy. Now you can see it reaches from side to side. And I don't think that's particularly attractive. So let's get a design element called paper. You can see I can drop it above or below the text. Let's drop it above. And what I like about this is it makes the area smaller and it goes up into the banner image. You can see when I drag the copy in there, it looks better. I think we could do even better than this. So let's go ahead and get a title with 2 columns and drop that. And you can see that adds a title for us and 2 drop zones. Let's pick up the text and drop it into one of those columns. Okay, so you can see now I'm really starting to assemble the page here. Let's go ahead and add a title. All right. Now we're going to add a lead form. Of course, we want people to sign up and give us a lead here. So I've added the HubSpot lead form, and now I'm going to choose the form that I want from HubSpot. So you can see an integration here where I've got forms in HubSpot. I just picked the one that I want in the editor here, and now I can see that form and potentially even interact with it right here. All right. Now you can see here I've got an image, and you can see that as I hover over these areas, this is another thing I want to show you, is that I've got these little colors that correspond to the colors in the components area that show me where things can be dropped. And so when I grab this paper, for example, and I try to drop that, you can see only a few drop zones allow me to drop that. And so I can very visually see what components can go where. So for example, I can see that this image goes here. Now we'll go ahead and go over to assets. And we're going to find an asset that works well for our page here. Let's look up retail. So now we just drop that asset over top of the placeholder, and now we've got a beautiful image there. And here you can see a little bit more of the library. It's sort of a paginated list of images that we can use search to find things in. Now we're going to go back to components, and we're going to drag one more component onto the page, which is a featured blog article. This is a targeted component, and I'm going to show you a little bit more about that in just a second. So what we're going to do before we get into that is we're just going to reorganize the page a little bit. I want you to see that we can lay things out however we like, and we can change our minds and really work through the design. And once we get to something we like, we can keep it. Now, let's take a look at this featured blog article here. And to do that, let's open up the information architecture on the left-hand side. And you can see here that we've got individual blog articles, and I can get to the articles that way. But I can also click on the item right on the screen and click the pencil. And this opens a new view that we haven't seen yet, which is called the form view. Now, we've been talking a lot about visual editing, but here we see there's a form view where we have all of the fields, all the structured content behind the blog article, including this taxonomy and this other metadata here that we're going to use to drive targeting. And this is where forms are really valuable because they capture non-visual content. And then I can use that to target the content. So let's choose the audience for design. And here you can see a featured blog article on AR for design. And then I can go back to my segment and change it to manufacturing again and apply that. And as a user who's focused on that, I'd see this manufacturing blog article. And so that's both an example of content targeting in Crafter and also a great example of non-visual content and where forms are useful. Okay, now we've created a page. Let's go in and look at it into some different channels here. So we're going to change the view, and we'll set that view up to be an iPhone or a smartphone, for example. And you can see here, I can take a look at that device. I can even edit in this mode if I need to change something. I can turn the phone on its side and work the same way. So it gives me a great preview for different devices, and these devices are pluggable. Here's another device, a tablet. And here you can see I can turn the tablet on its side as well. And here's a great example where we can really see how the paper responds to these different viewport sizes. So when the tablet is in landscape mode, the paper moves up into the banner, and when it's in portrait mode, it stacks. Now we've seen an example of visual editing and form-based editing. I'm going to show you one more style of editing supported by CrafterCMS, and that's bulk edit. So we're going to go up to the left-hand toolbar here, click on bulk edit. We're going to choose our content type, which is blog, and you've been introduced to that now. And here you can see all the fields of a blog in a spreadsheet style interface, and we can make changes here to many blogs at once. We can do find and replace, and this style editing lends itself to content editing that is best done in a tabular format. So you see we made a change here. We can see that it's green. Like I said, we could also do a find and replace. And it's not just text fields. You can also edit images and relationship style fields as well. So let's just edit this image, for example. We click on the field, click edit, and here you can see we have our image picker. This is connected to the proper data sources and so on. We can use that image picker fully to see a bigger preview and so on, and make changes if we like. Okay. Now we've made one change here. Let's go ahead and save it, and then we can exit this view. So very briefly for the developers and architects in the room, even though we've been making very visual edits throughout the course of the last few minutes here, all of the content is captured in a presentationless way. And Crafter very cleanly separates code, content, and presentation from one another. And that makes it possible for us to serve content in any format, whether that's visual like we're seeing here, and to serve it for any channel, and do so in a completely headless fashion. So to demonstrate that, we're going to click on Project Tools here, and we're going to go into the GraphQL API interface, which is just one of the APIs that we have. And I'm going to execute this query for gym name here. And you can see that we got back Real Vision X. I'm going to go back into preview and just add a simple exclamation point here. Let's go ahead and do that. And now we're going to go back into GraphQL and rerun the query, and we can see that is immediately updated here. Now, GraphQL is just one of our API interfaces, but we really like it because it gives you a good degree of control over the shape of your query. So for example, here, if I don't like gym name as my field, I can change it to company name and then re-execute the query. And now I've changed the shape of the response a little bit. Crafter has various APIs that are out of the box where we dictate the shape of the API. We have GraphQL, we have some degree of change. And then you can create your own REST APIs and control the shape of your API 100%. Okay, let's put our authoring hats back on and let's go back out to preview. I want to finish up by talking about some tools and so on. So what we're going to do is close this out. And you can see over here on the right-hand side, we have a Yoast plugin where we can see some of our SEO feedback. Here you can see we're getting some feedback. We need to make some changes here to make sure that this page is going to perform properly in SEO. Yoast is a plugin that you can install into any of your projects and get that kind of feedback. And it's great that you have that right next to your visual presentation. Okay, let's go ahead and close that up. And we also talked about workflow. So let's take a quick look at that. So over in the left-hand toolbar here, you'll see a specific workflow for campaigns. And you can see here that we've got a number of items on a Kanban board, and these actually map directly to a Trello board. And they are in fact connected. So I'm going to go ahead and change the background image here in Trello. So let's choose something a little digital here, like this background here. And we'll set that in Trello. And also I see here that SEO shows up a little late in the workflow. So I'm going to change that workflow and the order of it. So you can see here that we've made those changes. And now let's go back to Crafter Studio. And what we're going to see is that these items are going to reflect in Crafter Studio as well. Now, this is not an iframe into Trello. This is a full React-based implementation that uses Trello APIs. And so, for example, I can click on the item here and see elements linked in the Trello card, including this brief in Google Docs. This is a wonderful campaign design brief here. Don't steal my ideas. And I can see that exact same set of content, including the campaign page for demo that we're editing here. That's linked to the workflow. And by being linked to the workflow, this allows us to do some neat things. So for example, I can go into my Kanban board and pick up demo and move it into publish and drop it. And we're going to see that move in Trello as well, but it also kicks off a workflow. So we'll see that the demo page moved to an actual published state and then moved to completion. So there's a bit of automation tied to that specific step in the workflow. So this is really powerful stuff. And what I love about this is it allows teams to work both inside of Studio where it's natural for them if they're on the web team, but also for those folks that are part of our workflows, whether they are digital agencies who don't maybe have access to our network and our tools, or it may not be appropriate or reasonable or worthwhile to invite them into our web CMS. We can have them work with us in a tool like Trello or Workday or Asana or some other board, but that's very cleanly integrated with our CMS and our CMS team. We also have internal stakeholders like product teams and HR and legal and so on that oftentimes need to review content and provide feedback, but don't want to get into a CMS. And these folks are used to working with these style tools. And so this provides a great bridge that brings everybody together, allows them to work in a very seamless way. Again, in tools that they're familiar with. And that's the theme here. Let's just really double down on that idea that we don't want to put a lot of abstraction or introduce a lot of new learning. We want to leverage what people are used to and give them tools that feel natural. And I think both the visual editing and the workflow tools that we've seen today do exactly that. So now let's jump back to the slides. I want to cover a little bit more information and then talk about where we're going. So first, let's remember what we just saw in the demo, a mature visual editing in a headless CMS world today, late in the Web 2.0 cycle. needs to have visual editing, but with immediate feedback in place on the screen, not a form that's completely abstract from the content, not a form that's a side of the content, but something that you're really touching right on the screen, and it needs to work with any technology and any channel. You also need to support drag and drop layout and screen and page construction and really have control over where that applies. There are places, as we'll see, where authors really need a high degree of control and need to be able to build very bespoke things. And then there are other areas of your content and so on that need a lot more structure and similarity and conformity across a group of objects. And you also need to support non-visual properties for metadata and SEO and behavioral properties, like the targeting example that we saw. And this is where you should be using forms, because that's where it makes the most sense to do so. And of course, we don't mention it on this slide, but you should have a bulk edit as well. I mean, there's just times where it just makes sense to be able to make a lot of changes at once or do a find and replace and so on. And bulk edit is a great way to do that. And as we just saw, you want to be able to support modern workflows in tools that are natural for everybody in the team across a multidisciplinary team, and then also be able to support authors with tools like AI and metrics and so on. Now, visual editing is awesome, but it relies on some content management fundamentals to make it possible. And the first component of those fundamentals is what we call information architecture. And this has to do with the organization systems in the platform, the labeling systems, navigation, and search support, and so on. And I think we saw examples of those components throughout the demo. You could see the information architecture, the organization system in the left-hand toolbar with the various cabinets. You could see a very brief example of labeling systems and taxonomy when we looked at the targeting and so on. You can see how search just pervades every aspect of Crafter Studio. All of the little interfaces have search built into them and filtering to make it easy to find your content. Also, behind visual editing is a very strong content model. It is your project that defines what the objects are, whether they are home pages and landing pages and blog posts or facts to be sent out through Alexa. And you define what those properties are in those models and what the relationships are from one model to another. And you do that through a tool that we have that allows you to define what the objects are in the system and then drag and drop different properties and their appropriate property types into the tool, as well as properties that represent relationships to other types of objects. And then the last thing that I really want to talk about is what I would call the spectrum of structure and control in your content modeling. And so you have content modeling that's very strictly defined on one end of the spectrum, and on the other end of the spectrum you have completely free form, and then a big continuum that sort of spans between the two, where assembled content sort of sits in the middle. And it's important that your content management system allows you to span that entire spectrum, because different use cases call for a different level of control. So for example, in the strictly defined space, you're talking about things like resources and contacts and authors, products and reviews that have a very strict structure, because they're going to be reused and not only reused but reused in different contexts and displayed in different contexts. In the middle, you have assembled content, things like home pages, section pages, blogs and articles, FAQs, and menus. And you can see I have this set a little bit more to the structured side of assembled, because these are types of assets and artifacts that you want to have some degree of control over and some ability to change. Today are we going to have a slider at the top of the screen, or are we going to have a video? Are we going to maybe promote or highlight a product and so on? But you also want to have a degree of familiarity with your homepage, or you want to have a bit of continuity between all of your blog posts and articles. So while you may allow the author to have some control over what's in a rail of that page or screen, the main body section is going to be pretty structured. And so that kind of illustrates that style of content. And then on freeform, you're going to have things like landing pages, product and marketing pages, and other types of screens, bespoke pages and screens, emails that you're building. These are going to be completely freeform. And so you can see here that just in a simple example of a website, you've got all of these use cases where you've got very strictly defined content and completely freeform content. And the system needs to allow you to support all of those in that very visual native fashion. Now take a look at this. The web is continuing to evolve. And the fact is that while some content management tools are just now reaching a reasonable level of maturity, with most of these systems still in the early stages of that cycle, the web is advancing towards this new era. And the industry calls this new era Web 3.0, which is not only read-write, but also makes major headway in the direction of becoming a read, write, and execute style environment. What do I mean by this? Well, think about it. Web 2.0 brought us a lot of advancement in terms of service orientation of our infrastructure. But now we see a composable movement to better orchestrate and leverage those services. We see technologies like blockchain and similar ledger technologies that allow distributed systems to track data in a tamper-proof fashion. We're seeing smart contracts. And importantly, we're seeing major gains in AI utilization to leverage these platforms both automatically and as an assistant in powerful ways across all modalities, including new ways of interacting. So we can see that there's a difference in sort of where the web technology is and where a lot of the vendors are. And we'll talk more about this in a bit, but at CrafterCMS, we're not focused on that maturity arc and trajectory of Web 2.0. We're already looking at evolving for a mature Web 3.0 environment. As the web itself matures into a Web 3.0 space, with this concept of read, write, execute, and eventually even the concept of ownership and data ownership, I think you're going to see a need for a whole different kind of content management. And today's tools, for the most part, are not yet focused on that. This creates an opening for new products to come in, and that new products coming in is where we often see the resets happen, because they want to introduce the fundamental concepts and then build the authoring tools back up. And of course, that's a bit of speculation, so we'll have to wait and see how things play out. But I definitely want to talk about how we're orienting towards that Web 3.0 world, both right now and going forward, and how we plan to make sure that the visual editing capabilities stay strong, just like we did through the Web 2.0 transition. So in order to do that, we have to talk about what's important in order to support things like composable and AI. Now, as you saw, we already support some level of composability and AI. We can easily bring together capabilities and wire them together and have them interact. But we want to be able to do much more. As we saw in the demo, we can already leverage AI to help generate copy and images and so on. But again, we want to be able to do much more. And what's required in order to do more with these systems is to provide the system itself with a better understanding of what the content is and how it works together with other content. In other words, we need support for really strong content models that have very well-defined fields that mean the same thing across all objects, and great metadata about those fields, what they are, who the audience is, and so on. And of course, the actual properties that you collect are going to depend on your use case. Another thing that we need is great information about how the content and fields relate to one another. And for us, this means completely rethinking and revamping our content modeling platform with really discrete fields, powerful new capabilities with relationships between fields, and great metadata about those fields. And again, that kind of information is really going to supercharge our ability to automate and leverage the content in a composable context, or create really powerful AI experiences instead of, for example, working field by field, be able to work against an entire content type at once or across many different content types. It also helps us with being better in a search context, again, because there's a very strong relationship between objects and their field types and the meaning of those fields. And we're going to be doing all of this without rebooting any of that editing experience that you saw. So while there may be a reset and a new set of tools that come in to try and address this space in a more fulsome way, like we are, and they are probably likely to reset that authoring experience, we will not, because we're so crystal clear on just how critical those really rich visual editing capabilities are for content authors and how much is lost when they are taken away. All right, that's going to do it for the presentation portion of today's event. For those of you in attendance, we're going to take some live Q&A. And for everybody else, thank you for your time and attention. We really appreciate it. If you love what you saw here, please check us out online at CrafterCMS.com. You can try CrafterCMS through our trial system, and there's access to a lot of great webinars and other resources through the site there. Feel free to reach out to us through email at info@CrafterCMS.com. And if you're a developer looking to get your hands on Crafter and to work with the platform, you can find out more at CrafterCMS.org. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.